introduce the agenda. And this webinar is being recorded. So again, welcome. We have an agenda today that's focused on the topical, particularly COVID-related activities here in Montgomery County. My name is Frank Demaray with the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. I'm the Deputy Director. Today, we'll be giving you an overview and update on the COVID rent relief assistance. That's the county's rental assistance program that most of you should be familiar with. And we'll describe that status and recommendations. In the conversation today, you can add questions to the chat or the Q&A. The presenters here from the county will try and answer questions in the chat or the Q&A as we see significant questions that we think we need to address verbally. We'll try and build those into the presentations or we'll follow up on them, but please ask your questions in that chat or Q&A. After the COVID rent relief, we'll hear from the support organizations. We have a representative to speak to you about the kind of assistance that we can provide to the tenants to help you connect with your residents, to help them apply for assistance or other coordination. We'll have an update from the county's Landlord Tenant Affairs Office at DHCA on the significant COVID period landlord tenant issues, things that have changed. We'll have an update on the legislative changes, specifically requirements for the window guards and for the monitoring reporting on Mercury Service Regulators, and then we'll try and wrap it up. So with that, we're going to open up with Ilana Branda of the Department of Health and Human Services, who's going to cover the COVID rent relief assistance, and then we'll move on from there. So Ilana.
Thank you so much, Frank. So as Frank mentioned, I am Joanna Miller. I am the Deputy Chief for Services to End and Prevent Homelessness within HHS, and we are administering the COVID rent relief program. Hopefully you are all familiar with the program, but in case anyone is not, starting back in May of 2020, the county started setting aside funds specifically to support and provide assistance for individuals who were struggling to pay their rent due to a COVID impact. And so we started with local funds, we added some CARES Act money to it, and we are now leveraging the Emergency Rent Assistance Program Fund through the Treasury Department to operate what we call our CRRP Round 3. So we have released at this point just under $37 million of funds since that May 2020 date, and that includes over 19 million in just this recent ERA round. Our application portal is online, and we invite everyone who has experienced a COVID-related financial hardship, so that can be direct or indirect COVID-related financial hardship, and that has prevented them from being able to pay their rent, to apply. We are continuing to accept applications, so if you have any residents who have not yet applied, please encourage them, work with them to apply. In general, the grants are up to $12,000 for all COVID-related assistance. So if they received assistance from us in one of the previous rounds, if they got the $4,000 previously, they're eligible for an additional $8,000. And that is a critical point. They can apply again. So even if you have a resident who said, oh, but I already got that money, I'm not eligible, they can still apply again. So again, up to $12,000 in general. We do have some additional funds that we have set aside for households that have an income below 30% of AMI, that if it's needed to go above that 12,000, that we can, we do have some funds set aside for that. In those cases, as many of you may know, we do ask for you to partner with us a little bit more and ask for you to forgive 10% of the tenant's existing arrears, so that as we're leveraging more than that 12,000, we can just help stretch those dollars a little further. They must have been in the county since August 2020. That did not have to be at your property since that date, but we will ask for documentation that they have been a resident of Montgomery County since August of 2020, and their area median income should be below 50%. And one thing that I know has come up a lot is you may have a number of residents who were mostly out of work for 2020 and really didn't have the income, fell very far behind, but fortunate for them, their place of employment has reopened, or they have identified new employment, and they're now making more than 50% of AMI for their household size. We can certify income in multiple different ways, so please, they should still be applying. We can look at 2020 tax returns, so we can capture that they had that substantial loss in 2020, and we can certify their income based on that 2020 tax return. We can look at previous 30 days of income. So if they are still out of work and still struggling from COVID, we can look at that income now. We can also, if you are a property that does income certifications at your property, if you have done their income certification since January 1 of 2020, we can use that income certification. So you can provide that documentation to your tenant or share that with the caseworker once the case is assigned. And similarly, just like we can use your income certification if they're recipients of programs such as SNAP or temporary cash assistance for families with children, the TANF programs, we can use their certifications through those programs to certify them here. So again, just to say, if you have a family who really struggled and got behind, but is maybe more back on their feet now, they may still be eligible and should apply for the program. If you have not yet experienced our application portal, I see Frank is posting the links in the chat. Thank you, Frank. You just go to the website. The portal is the same link and the same location for both the tenant and the landlord application. Our process is we do require engagement with the tenant at some point in our process. So their request is that the tenant completes an application, but we're also asking you as the landlord to do your application. When you go in to start a new application, there is a short pre-eligibility screening. The first question asks if you are a renter or a landlord. When you follow that path, then you set up an account that is restricted to accessing that type of application. So to say, if you are able to assist your tenants in completing applications, please complete one pre-eligibility as a tenant so that you can set up a tenant account, and then you'll do as a landlord so that you can get into your own account. You will need a different email address to open up both accounts, just as a heads up. The landlord application, we're really looking to make sure you can make decisions on behalf of the property, that you can provide us with the information so that we can get you that payment. If you're not already registered in the county system as a vendor, it will give you the information on how to go about to register with the county as a vendor. And then we're looking for the information on your tenants. So copies of leases or eviction notices that you've given them, ledgers, showing late rent notices, any documentation you have, and some basic contact information for the resident in that unit. If you have multiple residents or tenants in one property, there is, when you're in the application, a bulk template Excel spreadsheet that you can download, complete, and it will upload, separate everything into its own applications. So you don't have to do it one by one. But if you just have one, you can go in. We're also going to ask some questions on what other assistance you may have or are receiving for that unit, whether you get the rental assistance program or the rent supplement program, if they are attached to a voucher or anything. It just helps us to figure out, to make sure we are only able to pay on the tenant's obligation. So to make sure we're just matching that up. The other thing that if you have not yet done an application as a landlord is, I want to make sure to note, is that there are a couple of certifications that you need to certify at the end of that application. It is our expectation that upon participating in this program and receiving the funds from the county, that you will forgive all legal fee, late fees, and penalty fees associated with that resident. You will offer an extension of a lease if their lease has either expired or is expiring during this time, and that you will cancel any active evictions, and that you will not pursue any new eviction actions until at least 30 days after our assistance ends. So if we pay prospective rent and we pay rent through this month, so we pay you now September's rent, so that 30 days you would not be able to proceed with any eviction actions prior to then October 31st. Of course, if there is a security issue, a safety issue, and you needed to file a breach of lease for the health and safety of everyone, that is exempt from that. But otherwise, our expectation is that you are supporting us as we are supporting you with this financial assistance, that you are also helping to support the resident remain in their housing. There is a ton of resources on our website, so I encourage you, if you have not perused it, to please look at that. It has self-certification templates that you can use with your tenants if you're helping them. It has FAQs specific for landlords and for tenants. All the tenant material is in multiple languages for the tenant to be able to access better. Documentation checklist, so your tenant knows what to bring and have. The other thing I'll touch on quickly, and then I'll look to try to see some of the questions I can grab. We know that this is a very challenging time. Everyone has bills to pay, everyone has responsibilities, and we're doing our best to try to support everyone in this. We have received about 10,000 applications. We have processed half of them. So to those that were in that half that we processed, we hope this has been an assistance for you. And if you do have additional residents, please help them navigate through the process. To those applications that we haven't gotten to, our team is working around the clock. I don't think there is ever an hour that goes by, even in middle of the night hours, weekend hours, that there is not an email or a Teams chat going back and forth with someone working on moving a case forward. So we are working as expeditiously as possible to move those cases forward. And we are committed to getting that assistance to all those eligible tenants. So in advance, I am thanking you all for your continued patience as we navigate this tremendous amount. We have released more funds in just these couple of months than our program usually does in multiple years. And so it's a lot that we are working on. But we are committed to working through them all. If you have any change of information, or your tenant has maybe a change of a phone number or contact information, please email that to us at hss@montgomerycountymd.gov so that we can make sure to update that application. We do not want that we deny someone because we can't get in touch with them. And I thank you, some of you in advance, where we have said we're struggling to get in touch with your tenant, and you have helped us, leaving a letter by their door, or knocking, or walking down, trying to catch them to let them know, hey, we're trying to, we need some income information, or we need to verify something else. So we thank you in advance for that assistance that you are providing. So as I mentioned, we will continue to be pushing through and processing the applications. We do have a variety of prioritization criteria and methods that allow us to pull the application. So it could be that you have some of your tenants who have already received funds, but not quite all of them. As long as when you go in the portal and you see that the application does not say denied, if it's pretty much in any of the initial review or received and matching, we are getting to those applications. We have not forgotten them, and we are working on them. So let me, I can just see there's questions flying. They do that quick little pop-up and go away. So I'm gonna pause for a quick moment and just try to kind of see what are like the big things that I can pull to maybe before I pass it along to Mary if there's anything really critical that I didn't catch. So please do not resubmit applications again. If you check that status, and as long as it's not showing that we've denied it, we are getting to it. Multiple applications just make it more confusing for us, because then we have to find them and make sure we are screening through those duplicates. We had the Treasury's ERA funding was done in 2 buckets. Through 2 different congressional acts. The first round of ERA funding, which is what we are focused on now, we got a total of $59 million between direct allocation and a state pass-through allocation. We have until September 30 of 2022. Sorry, I almost said 2020. We have until September 30 of 2022 to spend down that funds. And then there is ERA 2 that has also been passed. And we know we have at least 34 million coming to us through ERA 2, and that we have through 2025. What is important that I neglected to mention here is while we have many years to actually employ and spend these funds in support of our residents, there is very defined requirements from Treasury in terms of the limits on how much assistance an individual can get. For example, or not for example, what it is we cannot pay more than 12 months of arrears. And that is something that we have raised with Treasury, and unfortunately in how Congress crafted the bill and how the legislation was passed, it locks us into that 12-month, and we know that that is extremely challenging the farther and farther we move from that March 13th, 2020 date, which is when the pandemic was officially noted as a pandemic. That 12 months might not cover a tenant's full arrears. So we're going to leverage as much support as we can for each tenant, and hope that you will continue to partner with us. So I will acknowledge it's a little challenging going back and forth. So I think, Frank, if it's okay, I'll turn it over to Mary to talk about the community assistance, and I will work on answering the questions. And if there's something that I want to make sure to say verbally and raise to everyone else, I'll tag back in a little bit later, if that works with you, Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Alana. And we will come back to you. So after the next segment, you'll have a chance here to just highlight what you think are the most important points coming up in the questions and chats. And we have Mary Hunter from Housing Initiative Partnership to join us. We have 4 organizations that are identified at the websites that we put the links out there. The Department of Housing Community Affairs has a landlord-focused support web page that was put in the chat, but it's so it'll list all those 4 organizations. Mary's going to speak to the level of support available to help you and your tenants take advantage, your residents take advantage and work through this process. So thank you very much, Mary, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I work with Housing Initiative Partnership. As Frank said, we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency and affordable housing developer with bilingual English and Spanish staff. And we are one of the nonprofit partners that have been working with the county since the beginning of the pandemic to help tenants access COVID rent relief and other financial resources during the pandemic. And I'm just really happy to have this opportunity to reach out directly to landlords and property managers to let you know what kind of services we have to offer that can specifically help landlords and property managers help your tenants apply for this relief. We have been doing that in 3 ways so far, which I'll go over briefly. And I'll also just say we're always open to new ideas. So if there are any property managers or landlords that have a different way that you can envision we could help you, we're eager to partner. The 3 ways that we have been working with property managers and landlords is to do tenant outreach, direct tenant assistance and counseling, and weekly tenant Zoom sessions. So our tenant outreach, I'll start there. Our staff is able to and has been going to events on site at different properties, going to food distributions early in the pandemic, vaccine events that are happening at different properties, backpack distribution events at properties, and setting up a table to work with the tenants to let them know what the eligibility criteria is for the rent relief, and share with them how to apply, let them know we're available to help them in any way. And so that's one way we do outreach on site. We also have been working with property managers to reach out to specific tenants by knocking on doors where there's potentially a hard to reach tenant. And so we can have our outreach staff knock on a door, talk to the tenant. Again, a lot of we've encountered on both sides with landlords and tenants that there are trust issues. So it can be helpful to have a third party like us who comes in and just sort of says, here's to the tenant, sort of here's how this program works, here's what you can expect, here's how you apply, and we're going to help you. And we found that to be very effective if we can have those targeted door knocking outreach work. The other way that we've been doing the tenant outreach is at the courts. So at failure to pay rent hearings, our staff has been available at the courthouses to meet with the tenants. And again, we've seen that some of the tenants didn't know that they might be eligible. And so sometimes we can catch them in time to say, here's the eligibility, here's how you apply, and they can get their application in, which is of course a huge benefit to the property manager and landlord, because ultimately it will help pay all those arrears that have accumulated if the tenant gets approved. Okay, so that's the outreach component. And I also want to let you know that our agency and others have staff that are providing direct tenant assistance and counseling. And we do this both virtually and in person. Virtually, we have Zoom meetings with tenants. We talk to them on the phone. And we also are meeting with tenants in person in our office, which is located at the Up County Regional Services Center in Germantown. And we also have an office in the city of Gaithersburg, where we can sit down in front of a computer together. We can go over the application to help the tenant understand, maybe they're confused about a particular item on the application. We can talk them through that and also allow them to use our computer equipment, printers, multifunctional printers, if there's any thing they need to print out, like pay stubs or something like that, tax returns. So there's no fee for any of these services. We're receives funding through the county to help tenants in these ways. And specifically because oftentimes tenants have language barriers or technological barriers. So it's just been really important to sometimes have that direct assistance for the application. And finally, so we have the outreach, we have the direct assistance, and we also have weekly Zoom tenant information sessions that have been really helpful, because throughout the last 12 months, there have been so many different programs to assist tenants that are changing. New protections are available. Those are changing regularly. So these weekly Zoom sessions allow tenants and landlords, we welcome tenants and landlords to join us to learn more about some of the changes in the relief programs, and also to answer any questions that come up. So it's a real interactive Q&A session that we have as well. And as Frank said, we're not the only nonprofit doing this work. There are a number of others doing similar kinds of work. So looking forward to continuing to do this assistance. And I'm gonna hold off on the Q&A maybe for when I stop speaking. I'm not sure, Frank, are we doing the Q&A after, or?
We're going to try and answer them in the chat the best you can. And at the end, we'll try and wrap up for the ones that we don't think we've answered successfully in the chat, or that need highlighting.
Fantastic. I'll take a look then at some of the questions here and start to answer those. Feel free to keep asking, and I'll type as we go.
And yes, repeating that, please continue to add. We'll continue to try and answer everything that pops up. And to repeat one element that Mary was speaking to, which is housing initiative is one of 4. the Renters Alliance, the Latino Economic Development Corp, and CASA are listed at the DHCA website. They're providing similar services and support. And if you have specific requests for a specific property, please reach out and see what kind of assistance is available. That third-party intervention is what we're hoping. As Alana spoke, we're reaching significant applications. We have application processing efforts that are very challenging, but we do have more money available, and we're trying to reach other tenants that have been reluctant or not informed about eligibility. Just want to go back to Alana, see if you had any answers or issues that you wanted to raise or answer before we move to the next level.
Sure. There's a couple of things that I think are coming kind of back up and again a couple of times. On our website, there is a document checklist. So anything that your tenant will need in terms of what different type of income documentation or, proof of residency documentation, all of that is available. There are templates for the self-certifications also available on the website. So if you are working to assist a tenant with either getting the materials ready to actually put in the application, or if they put in their application without all the materials and helping them get it ready for after. I think one of the biggest things I will note that we've had a lot of back and forth around is a lot of individuals on their application, they put one pay stub, and especially with so many people with part of their COVID impact is the inconsistency of hours they may be getting slotted for in their shift job, is one pay stub gives a false impression of what their actual household income may be. And we are supposed to look at least a minimum of a month worth of income. So that's sometimes a lot of times where some of the back and forth sometimes happens is we get partial or we get income for just the applicant, but they don't make any statements on the rest of the members of the household that are over 18. So that is on the website, the document checklist. I encourage you to use that with your tenants to help them prepare their documentation. The other thing that I saw was coming up a couple times in the chat and I was starting to answer was just in terms of timing. So we opened up applications for this round in April 14th, and we have been processing applications since then. I will note there have been some times where it's been a little slower. We brought on many new staff also to help us. And so there was some onboarding time and training time for that. But as I noted, we have processed about 50% of the 10,000 applications we have received so far. Applications are not pulled first come, first serve. So I know there are some people who maybe got that application in on April 14th and have not heard a response yet. We have been pulling applications based on 3 different priority criteria. We have been looking at applications who have current eviction notices. So we're trying to clear those out before you actually have the sheriff show up. We want to make sure that we are clearing those out and that our funding at where it can help maintain some of their housing is really truly helping to maintain some of their housing. So we are pulling cases with imminent evictions or in that official process. Per Treasury guidelines, we are pulling cases where the tenant has noted that themselves or a member of their household has been unemployed for 90 days or more. Again, that is the Treasury guideline that we are required to follow. And then we are also pulling applications where the household lives in one of our high need area. Our high needs areas are defined, there were back in August of 2020, we built out a homeless prevention index, which took into account housing stress. So like where there's overcrowding, where there is high turnover rates, and where there is more affordability in the county. We looked at socioeconomic, so single parent headed households, households headed by African-American, Hispanic, Black, I'm sorry, I'm mixing those up a little bit, but households, minority headed households, and poverty rates. And then we also factored in COVID impacts. So where we were seeing those communities with extremely high transmission and test positivity rates, and where also county, sorry, it's starting to be the end of the day, but where county residents who are employed in the fields that were the most impacted by COVID, where they reside. So using census and employment data to look at, we have a prevalence of individuals who note that they work in hospitality industry who live in this area, for example. So those are our 3 prioritization factors that we are looking at. That is why some applications may be taking a little bit longer than others. We have started to pull some of those older ones to try to clear them out. But again, we did really want to make sure that for a tenant's housing stability, that we were really targeting those that were at the most vulnerable of that. So we will continue to process those cases. When we have a caseworker ready, they get assigned that case to work. They will reach out to the landlord and the tenant in the case. If you have not yet completed your landlord application part, they will ask you to do that and collect any missing documentation and process that case. Once they recommend that case for approval, it is reviewed by a supervisor and submitted for payment. Once that payment is requested, that check is usually out the door within 48 hours. And so you should receive it within a week or 2. I believe there was a couple of questions popping up about not getting a notification that a payment was approved, but not receiving the check. Please, on your approval letter, it should have the information for the caseworker that was working on that case. Please be in touch with them. If we need to do a stop payment or reissue, we can get that payment reissued out. So I think those were the couple of things that I caught, and I will check back again in case there was more that came in while I was speaking.
Okay, thank you very much, Alana. We're now going to be joined or led by Rosie McCray Moody from our Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, who's going to cover particularly COVID related, but overall reminders, as well as the changes that have occurred fairly recently relating to landlord tenant law. Thank you, Rosie.
Sorry. Hello. Thank you, Lorraine. I'm going to do a brief PowerPoint, and Ms. Driscoll's going to move them along for me. So this is updates to the law, what's going on with law and the COVID crisis. So we can go on to the next one. Where's Lorraine? Okay. So several new laws have been passed this year, which affect landlords and tenants. And we're going to go over each one. We're going to go over the impact of CDC guidelines, evictions, COVID rent relief status, and some new laws, criminal history and credit screening, reusable tenant screenings, residential tenant access to counsel, window guards, and Mercury service regulators. And when I get to those, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. McHugh in code enforcement, because those are basically code enforcement issues. So, as everybody knows by now, the CDC guidelines that restricted evictions have been rendered illegal. So that order is no longer in effect. So the moratorium expired originally on July 31st, and it was extended to October 31st, but the Supreme Court said no. So, having said that, landlords should continue to work with HHS and their tenants to get monies to pay off back rents. I can't see the bottom of the page. Okay, the next one. All right. So with no more, so you can continue to work with tenants. You still cannot evict tenants without a court order and the presence of the sheriff. And you can give notice to vacate for breach of lease and tenant holding over, but you have to comply with the law still. So you still have to give a 60-day notice to vacate. The notice must be in writing. It has to have the specific date, be received on or before the rent due date. And it needs to include the statement that general information regarding evictions is available from the Department of Housing. And that and you can give any other information you deem important. And put our phone number on there and tell people if they want to, they can call us if they think that the rent increase is excessive. Although right now it's restricted to 1.4, so that doesn't really count. Governor Hogan had instituted a catastrophic health emergency, and that ended as of midnight, August the 15th. So as of the 16th, that was no longer in effect. And the county council passed a law that said all rent increases were restricted to the voluntary rent guideline until 90 days after the end of the catastrophic health emergency. So that would be November the 15th. So as of November the 15th, you can issue a new notice to vacate. I mean, not a new notice of rent increase, I'm sorry, that can exceed the voluntary rent guideline. But that has to also comply with the law, which is another 90 days. So that notice has to be 90 days. And it should coincide with the rent due date, which is usually the 1st. So if you issue a notice on November the 15th raising rents, it will count from December 1st. So it'd be December, January, February. So as of March 1st, that increase would be more or could be more than the voluntary rent guideline. But you have to remember too, you can still only give one rent increase every 12 months. So if you've already issued your rent increase for the year, you can't do it again until next year. Even if it can be higher, you still can't do it until next year. And I need to tell you that there's current legislation pending before the council requesting that Rent Relief Act be extended for another year. It's pending, it hasn't passed at this point. So I don't know what the status is. That's up to the county council, but that's where we are on rent increases. New law, criminal history and credit screening. This is really an amendment to Chapter 27, Human Rights and Civil Liberties, but it does amend Chapter 29 because landlord tenant law requires that this information be in the lease. And we're currently drafting an addendum to the lease so you can be in compliance with the law. And this law prohibits a landlord from raising rents for at least 7 days during the application period. It requires rental applications to contain information regarding the process. So you have to tell the tenant up front what you're going to do, that you're going to run a credit check, that you're going to run a criminal history check, but you cannot require them to tell you whether they've been arrested, whether they've been convicted, or any of that. You can't require that. And unless you extend a conditional offer to that tenant, you can't require them to disclose anything, a criminal record. So if you run whatever you run and they don't make enough money or whatever, you can never ask them whether they've been convicted or arrested or anything. And even if you find that they have been convicted of certain crimes, you can't hold it against them. So if they've been arrested for public urination, misdemeanor theft, failure to leave a public building, or indecent exposure, or carrying an open container, you can't consider that when you make that decision. And if you make a decision that negatively impacts them, they have 7 days to provide notice of inaccuracy regarding any allegations that you put forth. And if you need more information about that, you should call it the Office of Human Rights. And the number is there, 240-777-8450. And I believe Lorraine is going to post this PowerPoint on our website. So you can go back and look at this next. There's a new law about reusable tennis screens. So this law allows a tenant to run his own credit check and give it to you as opposed to you running it. But it has to be less than 30 days old. It has to come from one of the major credit reporting agencies. So it has to be TransUnion or one of the big ones. And it has to have the full rental history. It has to have a criminal background check in it. It has to have employment, income, and verification, and it has to have the tenant's current address. And you as the landlord do not have to accept it. But if you do, you can't charge them an application fee. And you need to tell them up front. So if they come in and say, I ran my own credit check, you can say, no, I don't want to accept it. I'd rather run my own. So you have to tell them up front whether you're going to take it. You can't look at it and then say no. So you have to tell them up front, yes, I'm going to take it, or no, I'm not. So that's that. And the residential tenant access to counsel. This law says that each tenant is entitled to counsel if they have low or moderate income. And that's a good thing. And that's something that's still being worked out in terms of how they're going to pay for it. But the big thing in there is that you also, the landlord is now required to give the tenant 10 days notice before they file failure to pay rent. And the form will come from, it's a form that the court is going to issue, and it's called Notice of Intent to File a Complaint for Summary Ejectment. And this law is effective October 1st, 2021. I called the court Monday and it wasn't available, but it'll probably be available next week. And the notice has all these things in it: the date of the notice delivery, the description of past due rents, the specific time period of the notice, and you have to give it. If you file failure to pay rent and don't attach the notice after October 1st, they won't hear your case. So you have to get the notice, and that's it's called Notice of Intent to File a Complaint for Summary Ejectment. And so that's the big one. That takes effect October 1st. And in the court, as you may or may not know, the district court has a self-help center, which you've been able to call. Well, now they have people on duty in the court. And if you contact the self-help center, just go to the clerk's desk and say you want to speak to the attorney. They will answer basic questions of both landlords and tenants. So that's a service that is available. So who's next? And now we're going to go on to window guards. And I'm sure you've heard about this, that effective January 1st, 2022, that all multifamily units with openable windows above the ground floor level will have to have window guards in their windows if they're children at age 11 or under, or on request. And I'm going to pass this on to Mr. Dan McHugh to give you more details on the window guards.
All right, well, thank you, Rosie. So, as Rosie mentioned, window guards are required in all multifamily properties from the ground level, above the ground level. They must be installed on these windows at the landlord's expense. Must include window guards addendum in every lease upon signing, or the earliest lease renewal notice of a rent increase. Must include the information on every lease regarding window guards. Tenants must inform the landlord properly of any problems with the devices, that this law takes effect January 1st, 2022. With the window guards, we are in the middle of we have completed the regulation that goes along with this, and I'll put the link in the chat here in a little bit. Basically, the specs to achieve for the window guards that are going to be required. This regulation is on the county registry, and it is current. It will be there for the next time. Then it will go to the county council to be enacted as we move forward. For more information on this, you can go to our website, montgomerycountymd.gov/DHCA landlord tenants, or you can call 311 and ask to speak to someone in the code enforcement section. The next slide is the Mercury Regulators. This was Bill 5020 that is in effect. A Mercury Regulator, service regulator, device that is installed by the owner by the gas utility company to regulate the supply of natural gas to the structure. It contains mercury and is located inside a structure. The new law passed by the county council requires landlords of multifamily rental properties built before January 1st, 1968 to make reasonable efforts to photograph any indoor, an indoor gas regulator in their building. Provide a copy of this photo to Washington Gas by October 7th. And if Washington Gas replaces the Mercury service regulator indoors, must notify the tenants within 30 days of receiving such notification from Washington Gas and copy the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. This bill here is directly related to the incident that happened at the Flower Branch Apartments, trying to, eliminate potential reoccurrence type of situation. So hopefully, if you haven't already, please, send in photographs of your indoor Mercury service regulators to Washington Gas as soon as possible. Then you will be put on a list and they will be replacing these as they go through. I want to also mention that they're also doing their own survey, and they'll be coming to your properties looking at your service, gas service, to make sure that it is compliant. So with that, I will flip it back to Frank. Thank you much.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Now we've covered the topics that we're focused on covering. I'm just going to ask if our presenters see questions that have come up that you'd like to explore further. Okay.
I just want to say that landlord tenant staff has been trying to answer as we go. So hopefully they caught most of them. And as I said earlier, this that slideshow is going to be posted on our website. And you can always call 311 if you have questions about anything in there. And we'll be glad to help you.
Okay. Okay. Other topics that you think need to be covered? I guess questions that have been repeated that you think want to be reminded. I guess there's a couple things in here, Dan. I don't know if you saw after you were speaking about the timeline on the window guards. Anything there that you need to clarify?
The timeline is January 1st of 2022. The regulation, like I said, is in the county registry right now. We will be, I'll be posting it here in the chat. It has a 30-day window for comments, and then it gets presented to the county council for enactment. Once the regulation has been approved by the county council, We will send an email to all the licensed landlords that we have on our licensing database, a copy of that along with, steps moving forward.
All right. I'm not hearing other of our presenters feel that they have items in the questions or chats that haven't been addressed.
Frank, sorry, I have one thing.
Sure.
I was catching up. I just want to reiterate because it keeps on coming up again. We are processing applications 24/7. We've received over 10,000. We have processed more than half of them at this point. So we are getting to all of them, and we will get to yours. Please don't email us and just say, you haven't gotten to my application. When are you going to? We will get to it as quickly as we can. And honestly, that keeps us from doing the work and actually updating the applications and getting the information out. You can check the status of any of your applications that you have submitted. You can assist your tenant in checking the status of their application that they submitted by logging into your account. As long as the application does not say denied, we are getting to it. If it's in initial review, if it's in matching with landlord tenant, if it's noted as with the caseworker for processing, we are getting to it. So reiterate, I thank you for your patience. I know it is extremely challenging and hard to wait for some of these, but we are working to get through all the applications as quickly as we can. And as noted, it is not for first come, first serve. We are using prioritization to process those applications. So, you may have a resident who got an answer and you have another one that didn't. But again, as long as it does not say that it's denied, if it's in any of our other statuses, we are getting to it. If your application shows that it was payment requested or approved, and you have not actually received those funds, and it's been at least 2 weeks since that status showed that payment was requested or approved, please reach out to us. If you don't have the caseworker information, you can reach out to the housing stabilization inbox that has been email address that has been posted multiple times, and we can look into what happened with that check. If you register with the county not with ACH, that check is going to get mailed. And I will note, this is one thing that has come up, because Uncork actually sends all the payments to the county system digitally, it actually records them as an ACH. So your payment method will be however you are registered as a vendor with the county. So if you need to update that registration information, please do such. But again, we are working to get through all the applications. You can check the status of them online, and as long as it doesn't say denied, we're working through it. So thank you again for your patience with us on that. Oh, and I'm sorry, there's one other quick question that's coming in.
Yeah.
What happens with the system is if the software has an algorithm that it uses to try to match the tenant and the landlord application, what will happen if it matches those applications is they will get assigned the same number. And if it didn't happen on the very first day, one of the applications, generally it actually is the tenant application, status will change to closed, that it was merged with the landlords, but in their portal, in their account, the new application with the landlord number will show up. So they will still have access to see the status of that application. If the back end of the software system was not able to match the applications, and this happens for a variety of reasons, the tenant spells the street name incorrectly, when they're typing quickly, or a zip code is put in, incorrectly, and they don't do the verify of address feature that's in it. Many landlords, you guys have unfortunately submitted your corporate or your leasing office as the tenant's address instead of putting the actual unit address. So the system can't match those. So we have to work through and match those manually. We have people lined up that are doing that. They've been working every day to work through that. Where we are coming across an application where we can't match it, we are doing an outreach to kind of let the tenant know, hey, your landlord submitted an application for you. You know, you should come in and submit one in also. So we are doing that kind of outreach and trying to match them. So don't worry about, you know, kind of the multiple case numbers. We will connect them and we will smooth them over from our end. And yes, we do need a tenant application on file to review the applications. If we only have a landlord application, the most we can do is do that outreach to the tenant to ask them to get that application in. So I feel like there was one other thing I remember the one other thing I was going to say. I neglected to introduce Joanna Miller. Many of you have been conversing with her in the chat. She is a project manager here with us on the COVID rent relief program. She is many times the one when you guys do have issues that you've communicated with, or if you've participated on many of the other info sessions through DHCA or IOBA, many of you have connected with Joanna. So I just would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and thank her for answering all the questions and for being here. And many of you who, if you follow up with the housing stabilization, some of those may be forwarded to her. So you'll continue to hear from Joanna.
Ilana, before you leave, I just want you to stay on while one of the questions I thought was good, which was, you know, if a tenant is evicted, they will not be eligible for the rent relief, right? So that's something that's, I think, really important to understand is, you know, for those applications that are in process, if the eviction does take place, then those arrears won't be paid. So, you know, we're encouraging tenants and landlords to wait until a determination is made and to not evict. That's really, I think, the key to this process.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. That's a really good point. The assistance is for where a tenant has a current rent responsibility to enable them to stay housed. So if you, this program through the Treasury is not a mortgage debt landlord assistance program. So we do hope that you will all partner with us. Again, I recognize that you have many bills to pay too, and we are working to get the money out as quickly as possible, but allowing the tenant to stay supports all around both sides receiving those funds and obtaining that, maintaining the stability of home and housing.
I'm saying one item, Dan, if you don't mind. I don't know if it was really part of your presentation, but whether or not the county has window guard specs or approved window limiting devices that we highlight or can point people to.
We do not have a specific brand or type at this time. In the link that I posted is within the regulation. It defines, you know, window guards, limiting devices, what they should look like. At some point, as we get closer to all of this, we will have some examples on our website as well. But this regulation, executive regulation, is viewable on the link that I provided so that, you know, you can have a feel for, you know, what it's going to look like. So, thank you.
And then another one just on our municipalities, City of Tacoma Park, and other municipalities applicability.
No, this is for the county. This is for a Montgomery County rental license. The municipalities do not have landlord tenant that is out of our offices. So they are not municipalities of Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park are not included in this. Did the link show up? I mean, I see it over here, making sure that I put it out there a couple of times, I believe.
Okay. Other observations from other panelists, the things that they're seeing that should be answered? I'm just going to do then a bit of a wrap-up summary of all the things you were hearing today. Again, we'd like to start with thanking everyone for joining us. We know, as has been mentioned, these are very difficult times on financial side and in many ways. We understand the demands that you have on you from the changing laws and the requirements, and particularly the challenges with the rental delinquencies, the eviction limitations, and the processing. So you'll hear us talking about how hard everyone's working. What Ilana was speaking to is working through the applications, that we do have the money for the applications we have in hand. As she was saying, unless a application is denied, we feel comfortable, very high probability that application, as we get through it, will be eligible and will be receiving funds. But we do have the required steps and documentation and processing. The Treasury has streamlined some of those in some recent announcements, and we're working with every flexibility available to us. So we're hoping that the pace that we're on accelerates, but we will have a continuing updating of folks on that as we have any changes. But right now we are processing against the applications in hand and encouraging. The other point we're making here with the support Mary Hunter spoke to, the other organizations out there, we very much encourage anyone that's having trouble reaching their tenants, coordinating, communicating with their tenants, to take advantage of those resources, to have them, the counseling organizations, engage with yourself, see if we can connect your tenant to your building, entire building that are having difficulty, anyone that you can connect to those resources. Hopefully we can help folks understand what's available, expedite. We also spoke to some of the prioritization, and that any tenant that is in process with the court system, we will be trying to accelerate and assess and then award as quickly as we can. This is not to encourage action against tenants to get priority. We have significant resources committed to all of these cases, but if you do have tenants that have actions, it's very important that they would update their case, and that the county will be working with them and yourselves to resolve those cases. The items that Rosie spoke to and the legal changes is a fairly significant list there. The very highlight ones are the change to the COVID Rent Relief Act, the rent increase limit that's in place, the notice period that's required for that, and that's all available at the website. But it is specific dates for when you can give notice of increases up to certain amounts, and then when that changes. The changes in the CDC moratorium and other protections do not eliminate the other requirements in processing, so that as you're working with your tenants, the fact that the moratorium is expired, there's still a formal process, and all eviction actions have to go through that formal process, and that's also information available at our website, information in the Landlord Tenant Handbook, and in other detail that we have there on our landlord site to help you understand that process. The other laws that are coming on board are, set some new requirements and processing. So we encourage everyone to be aware of those. And as we were just closing out there on the property specific, the window guards and the requirements for notifications on the Mercury Service Regulators, those are important components of your activities, how to manage that, and we're available. So the Department of Housing Community Affairs, Department of Health and Human Services, our offices are open. We are working mostly teleworking, but we have staff in the office every day available, and we will respond to calls and emails to our web pages that are listed there, and we'll follow up with every complaint from a landlord on any element. And so please get in touch with us to get clarifications or to, if you have actions that are needed, that we'll work with you on those. Again, we're a few minutes after 4. We had scheduled more time. Just want to remain open here for questions that are coming in. Anybody want to pick up some of the late questions?
Lorraine said that she was going to answer this one live, but I'm not sure. But there was a question that is there something similar to what we're doing that a tenant can participate in Spanish? And the answer is yes. Yes, there is. There are weekly tenant information sessions in Spanish. Frank, do you think you could put the link in? You shared it earlier for the website with those. It's an ever-changing calendar, so there'll be links on the DHCA website for the weekly Zoom sessions, interactive in English. There's an English one and there's a Spanish one. So we definitely encourage you to let your tenants know to attend those, because it's a great way to get information, again, from a third party nonprofit. Maybe we'll de-escalate a little bit of any trust issues that might be a problem.
Okay, we'll get that posted.
And I would also, I know that someone's pointing out in the chat that from Renters Alliance, that if any property managers or landlords are struggling to reach a tenant, or if they know that a tenant has actually moved out, that would be helpful information, at least for the nonprofits to know, so we can share that information. We're going and door knocking at different properties where there are writs of possession and evictions, and it's really helpful to work with a property manager to know if that person has moved out, or if they're struggling to get in touch with their renter and the tenant and they can't. Then we'd love to know specifically who that is and how we can help.
Great.
And I believe that DHHS is also working directly in those ways with, hard to reach tenants.
Just a recent question, Dan, for window guards on condominiums or any HOA building.
Yeah, this would be something that you would have to work out with your landlord. These window guards are going to be on the inside, so they're not really affecting the outside of the windows or the aesthetics from the outside. So I don't think there would be much of an HOA approval for something that would be on the interior of the unit.
But it is required on any multi-unit building with greater than 2 stories, right? 2 stories.
So condos, yeah, right. So condos, you would need one on a condo of a rental unit.
Yep. Okay. Right now, the tracking is indicating that all of the questions that have been asked in the Q&A have at least had an answer posted there. A reminder that this entire webinar will be available on our website. It'll take us a day or so to get it loaded. We'll make sure folks in our next email blast that we put out will remind, and you can share that with any of your colleagues on this. Okay. So we've, without continuing to ask for more questions, I think we've covered the fundamentals here. We very much appreciate everybody for participating. I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge the difficulties that some of our community members are going through right now. We had a flooding event at a rental property that was, had catastrophic impact. So we're, concerned about those folks and yourselves as well as we go through the rest of today's extreme weather and as we prepare for ongoing weather challenges as our world is changing. But particularly a tough day today. I want to acknowledge that and say that we appreciate everything that the property management and landlord community is doing in this catastrophic healthcare emergency and everything you do to keep your operations safe and secure. And we remain committed to everything we can do to support that. So with that, without any further questions or recommendations from our team, I'll say thank you very much and we'll sign off for today. Thank you.